Welcome back to Hoops 360. I'm Cassandra Negley. Caroline Fenton is at the Super Bowl. You can catch her with Jason Fitz on Yahoo Sports daily leading up to the Super Bowl. So I invited Maggie Vanoni to join me from CT Insider. She covers Yukon sports and Connecticut Sun. Maggie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Of course. We're going to go deep on Yukon. What did we learn from that game with Tennessee, how their season is looking? But first, we have to get into a bunch more because there was a meeting about the WNBA CBA. Unrivaled was in Philadelphia. And before she left for the Super Bowl, Caroline spoke with Kia Nurse about all things Yukon and Athletes Unlimited. So let's start with the WNBA CBA, as we always do. League owners and the players union met in person in New York on Monday. This is what Kelsey Plum told us in Philadelphia last week for that Unrivaled stop. It's believed to be the first time that they had this type of in-person meeting since about October. There was no new proposal on the table. I was told the last proposal came from the union to the WNBA. Now, the WNBA had not responded to that in December. I was told because they felt it was not that different from a previous one. So this meeting was more about sentiments, philosophies, how they are approaching their CBA on both sides, their proposals. Kelsey Plum was pretty optimistic. I thought the big takeaway from her was before the meeting, she talked about this game of telephone, how every time in our lives, the game of telephone, the word can get distorted. And players have talked about just wanting to get in front of the owners for this meeting. It included Negley, the president, Alicia Clark, Brianna Turner, and Stephanie Dolson in attendance. Nafisa and Kelsey Plum were unavailable to make it. They did try to get there. Brianna Stewart also did not make it. About 40 players in total were involved. I was told it was kind of like an all-star feel. They were encouraged to teleconference into this meeting and just hear from the owners about why the percentage is what it is. I was told that there is some disappointment from players that the league had not responded to the proposal that was sent. So basically, this was a discussion is all it was. Maggie, reading everything and kind of knowing that much, what were your takeaways from out of this meeting?
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway is that I was surprised that it seemed like this was the first in-person meeting these two sides have had since the fall, or even since during the WNBA season in September, October. So that was kind of surprising to me that they're not meeting as regularly as I would assume. I'm also surprised that, it seems like the union is still kind of waiting for the league's next move, right? It seems like the W is now, it's their decision about how to respond to the former proposal from the union and what they will respond with after meeting with these people, meeting with the players in person. Hopefully, for the sake of the league and the season, that an agreement is sooner. Now they've heard both sides in person. Like the reference Kelsey Plum's telephone quote, we all know messages get distorted the more they get spread. And in person is a best chance to make sure the messages in each side is heard.
Yeah, you mentioned what comes next. To my understanding, the league understands that the players expect them to respond to that proposal. That's what I was told the next step would be. But kind of to your point, we are past crunch time, it feels like, and we're going to get into how this impacts teams and the league as a whole, as we keep going through February. But I think we should definitely talk about the potential of a strike and a work stoppage. Obviously, that's underlined everything. Any good union, as I've been told many times, prepares their players for that. But being in Philadelphia, I thought it was interesting how in one media availability, you have Azrae Stevens, who is a veteran, talking about how she finds it ridiculous a deal is still not done. Ridiculous was her words. She seemed very frustrated that there just hasn't been movement. And she spoke really openly about being prepared for a strike. She made a mention of a quip, she'll enjoy her summer, but financially she's ready for that. And those types of players can be ready for that. I think if you look at the executive board, most of these players can be ready for that. At the same time, Azrae was speaking, Shug Sutton was speaking to the Nine about how it's a little more unsure if she can kind of weather that storm. This is a player who was taken last in her draft class. I wrote a story about how she's Ms. Irrelevant. Like, it's more difficult for those kinds of people. And I think it's important when you're talking about any strike that like every player is coming at it from a different background and how they view money or where they come from or like how that money is spent. I mean, knowing and hearing what you've heard, like, do you feel like we're closer to a strike than ever before?
I don't know. I think obviously, like we've heard the players say that is on the table, but it's not. Neither side wants a lockout. Neither side wants us to drag on for months and there not be a season or a delayed season. I think to your point, when I think of strike, I think of those lower level mid-tier players who don't make the money, right? Who maybe this is their only financial secure income, right? They're playing overseas in the winter, but in the summer, this is what they need. I also think of housing, right? A lot of these players, maybe they can't go back to their college towns or their family homes. Maybe this is where they live. And what would happen to where would they be, their housing, their rent? I also think of players who have more responsibilities, who have kids, who have family members looking after, who rely on those incomes. So I think a strike, it's effective in some ways for sure, but I think of the players who maybe are a little worried about that and worried about where their resources would come from if there is a lockout, a strike, and then when would the season start?
Yeah. And it does seem really early to make that decision, even though we were just talking about crunch time. Like, it is early February, the season isn't supposed to start until May. ESPN reported that there is now, or at least has been, debate in the executive committee. There is a group who feels like they've made incredible headwinds, and this is a deal that they should take, or at least similar to a deal that they should take, maybe a few tweaks. And then there are others who feel like they should wait out and get more than what they're asking for. I know there's kind of talk back and forth about if that is fracturing or not. I think that just seems like the next progression. Like, it is now, I hate to keep using this word, like crunch time, like the heat is on, and it's going to get hotter. Like, there are decisions to continue to be made. I agree with you. I do think it's good that they've met in person. That seems a very healthy thing to do. Kelsey Plum was very optimistic, so it's disappointing that she couldn't make it there. You cover the Sun, though. So in terms of that, like, how does this CBA negotiations affect the Sun right now and everything we've heard this week?
Yeah, kind of what you mentioned, it being crunch time. I mean, the Sun literally, they've committed to playing in Connecticut this 2026 season. After that, they don't know. After that, they haven't announced anything. The franchise is currently up for sale. It has been since last May. And they've had offers from Boston. They've had offers from the state of Connecticut. And it appears both those offers have been denied or blocked by the league. Through reporting, it seems like the league is really preferring to go to a bigger market, maybe Houston. They were previously the Houston Comets. They obviously folded, and now that that market wants to re-enter the WNBA. And so the franchise is kind of in limbo, right? They can't really move. They can't really sell until the CBA is finalized. Because what new owner wants to buy a team when they don't know what they're going to be getting into? They don't know the responsibilities are going to happen with the new CBA, how much money they'll be responsible for, just what it will look like. So why would they be involved until the CBA is finalized? The other issue is the W really appears to be kind of putting the Sun on the back burner until the CBA is finalized. From our reporting at CT Insider, the Sun have reached out, the Mohegan Tribe owner to the Sun have reached out to the W trying to move forward with the process, and the W has either not responded or has been slow to respond. Obviously, the CBA is a priority for sure. It affects way more than just the Sun. The Sun itself, they're trying to figure out what their future looks like, right? Do they pack up and move after next season? Are they staying in New England? Are they staying in Connecticut? The Sun have been in Connecticut since 2002-3, so 20 plus years. The Mohegan Tribe saved this franchise. It was originally in Orlando from being folded. So they've done a really good job of keeping it, of making it a loyal fan base, of making it one of the top tier franchises in terms of talent, in terms of reputation. They were in the finals 4 times in program history, or franchise history. Unfortunately, the past couple of years, they've had a lot of turnover in their roster. So hasn't been as dominant on the court. But Connecticut loves its women's basketball, whether it's pro, whether it's college. And so if they do end up leaving, I think it'd be a huge blow to the state. But at this point, the Sun is just waiting for the W to make a decision on who they can sell to and where they will go.
Do you have any indication of like how quickly it could happen once a CBA is signed? Like, obviously the league, as you mentioned, has so much more to figure out first and foremost, like an expansion draft,
right,
free agency, etc., the draft. But if you're the Mohegan Sun and anyone working for the Sun organization, like a year is not a long time to just pick up and move. Like, is there any indication of once we do this, we can figure this out?
Yeah, when I was talking to lawyers and former just people involved in big franchise sales like this, it usually takes 6 to 8 months in terms of like handing over the product to launching it somewhere else. It obviously depends on where it is. If the new market is suitable, if it's already going back into when the tribe bought the Sun, they had never had a pro sports franchise at all in the casino. So they had to buy basketballs. They had to buy equipment. I remember the former owners were telling me that they had to buy sports bras. And they were like, what sizes do we need? Like, how do we buy jerseys? They have to start from ground zero. Obviously, Houston already knows it has a fan base for women's basketball. But how do you kind of relaunch that, right? So that would take time to... Do you go back to the Comet's name, kind of like what the Fire are doing? Or do you start over from scratch in a brand new logo, brand new team? So it could take anywhere from 6 to 8 months determining on where they want to start in the process.
So long, so much. I've said it a lot here, but it will hurt my heart when and if the Sun leave Connecticut as a whole. Like, I just think it's been so good. You and I have both been to playoff games there, and it's not to the level of other places. Obviously, the arena can't hold it, but there are a lot of diehard women's basketball fans there, and it will hurt to see the franchise in a different place.
Absolutely. I mean, it's Connecticut's only pro sports team, period. And I think losing that would be really disappointing to the state. There goes your chance of showing young girls what they could be in the WNBA, of where women's sports can be, of where, you don't have to be women's basketball, but maybe you want to be a professional women's athlete in a different sport. And so losing that impact is really disappointing.
Yeah. And all the Yukon homecomings we'll miss out on, like all the Yukon players going back to play in Connecticut.
Yeah, I think that's why a lot of people were bummed that this Boston deal kind of fell through or didn't go up according to plan, just because, it's in Boston, but it's still New England, right? And that's only a 2-hour, hour and a half drive from a lot of people in Connecticut. So I think a lot of people were hoping, okay, if they do have to move, hopefully they at least stay within driving distance. But it looks like the league wants them out of the state, out of New England completely.
Yeah. Also hard because it's not super easy to get into Brooklyn. And then I guess the next closest team you'd have is Toronto and eventually Philadelphia, which is also not the easiest trip.
I was going to say, that's a lot of players' biggest critique about the Sun right now, is that they're in the middle of, nowhere. No offense to Uconn, but it's an hour away from your closest city.
Hey, that's why I like it.
Yeah. Some people do. I know Tina Charles said she loves the quietness and she loves being able to go fishing on the beach. It's not like an LA beach, obviously, but it's a beach and it's quiet. You're not going to be bombarded by people everywhere you go. Some people get recognized, but you can really live a normal life. And I think that's why some older players do appreciate that they can just be themselves. They don't have to have the pressure of being on every time or, doing stuff constantly. But then again, it's hard, right? Your closest airport is Bradley, and that's an hour drive, and that's really hard to get to. There's no direct flights to any of these big markets in or out of Bradley, or you could fly to Providence, or you fly to Boston, which has a lot of direct flights, but then you're driving 2 hours back to your home base. So it can be really inconvenient for sure, whether you're a player for the Sun or an opposing player.
Before we move on, there is one thing I want to point out about the CBA, kind of tied into a place like Connecticut. ESPN initially obtained the kind of WNBA proposal for the CBA. Included in it, the biggest thing I took away was the addition of developmental contracts, having, I believe it's 2 players on a development roster spot. This is something players had been asking for a while. This is something we've all been talking about in terms of injuries and whatnot. Do you have any thoughts on how huge that is if it gets passed in a CBA?
Yeah, I think that's huge. I think so many people have asked for bigger roster sizes, whether that's, right now it's at max 12, but many of these teams don't carry 12 because of salary cap issues. So you're looking at 11, and more often than not all 11 are healthy at the same time. So I think having those extra players would be super helpful, not just to develop them and maybe, they are a player who aren't quite at the W level, but maybe they need a little bit more time, more reps, and they can be there soon. Or like you have injuries and you need another body. Look at the Indiana Fever last summer, right? They were just pulling everybody because they kept getting hit by the injuries. So I think having the ability just to have someone who's already in your system, knows your plays, you trust, who is, working out with you guys, they're developing, I think that'd be a huge asset.
Yeah, a huge addition by the WNBA if that does get put into the CBA, and seems like something the union would be happy about as well. Kind of one of those down ballot things that doesn't seem like has been talked about much while they're pushing for revenue sharing. Maggie, I was in Philadelphia last week for Unrivaled's first tour stop. They've talked about this for a while. They wanted to take it on the road. Absolutely electric. I was very impressed. Record-breaking crowd, 21,490 fans. Took over the Backstreet Boys, 1999, the height of the Backstreet Boys, more fans than they pulled. Took over Michael Jordan's last game in the arena as a Chicago Bull. And it is the highest attended women's basketball regular season game in the country's history. Took out Caitlin Clark's 2024 rookie season finale. Huge night for Unrivaled. I'm wondering if you have any initial thoughts out of Philadelphia. I have a bunch, but I want to give it to you first.
Well, I'm first so jealous because it looked so cool. It looked like such a fun atmosphere, and just what a moment for women's basketball. Yes, what a moment for Unrivaled, but what a moment for women's basketball and its athletes. It looked amazing. Also, I know we'll talk about it later, but what a day for Marina Mabrey.
Oh, Marina. I love what you said about what a day for women's basketball. So I think they've tapped into a huge thing going on the road. I spoke to a lot of fans, especially at their kind of live watch party on the facility. It was outside the arena. People stayed to watch the game, or if they had tickets, they went in to watch the game. But as you're walking around, there's Liberty gear, there's WNBA team gear, Unrivaled gear, player gear, Caitlin Clark stuff, Angel Reese stuff, all sorts of different jerseys. There's a Philadelphia Rage jersey from the ABL years. Everyone I spoke with, it wasn't so much, I love Unrivaled or I love the WNBA. It was I love women's basketball. I love the players. There was one family I spoke with, the mom, Lisa Hunter, and this was true of a few people. She's very much the kind of person who aligns her money with her values. And so one of the things she said was she's actually a Yukon fan. Her husband grew up in Connecticut, kind of the Rebecca Lobo years, and she became a Yukon fan. Her daughters, 9 and 3, I believe, are Yukon fans. And she enjoyed watching them at the next level and developing. But obviously, the WNBA is not a long season. Unrivaled stepped in. Stewie and Fee went to Yukon. There's a natural connection there. But she said she also really liked that, Sephora's on the court. You can see the name, on referees. They have this kind of parachute drop in the game. There's other women's brands or things that stand up for social justice causes that they're affiliated with. This is matters a lot to people. There's clearly a camaraderie a bunch about all of these people. Connections to players was big. Being in the arena, and I spoke with a few players about this beforehand, it's everyone is rooting for the same thing, which is kind of wild. So you bring up Marina, and as the first quarter keeps going, I also want to point out Marina Mabrey, for those tuning in, she scored, we're getting into it later, but 47 points, record, 27 in the first quarter, absolutely went off. Incredible game by her. She did not score her first basket until 5 minutes into the game, though, or the 5-minute mark. So like scored in even less time. But as she keeps making baskets, like fans are like sitting up. They're like, wait, what's going on? And they're so locked into what's happening. And she hits that final shot where she just like kind of grabs a loose ball a little bit that she doesn't have a full handle on, hits the basket, and like everyone goes absolutely bonkers.
I love that. It's like the classic old, like, just watch us once, right? Like, just watch it once and you will see how awesome it is, how fun it is, whether you are a Marina Maybe fan, whether you are an Unrivaled fan, like, all you gotta do is watch it once.
It's like the hockey thing. Like everyone says about hockey, just go to an actual game. Mm-hmm. I feel like that was Unrivaled. And you and I talked a little bit about this. We don't tune into every single Unrivaled game. There's a lot of other stuff going on, and maybe other people don't as well. TV viewership numbers, Alex Bizzell said, is not everything, and Unrivaled isn't, at least publicly, like super downcast by them, but they're not great. And that's maybe to be expected from a second-year league. They also pointed out they started the season earlier, so they're going up against NFL and college football. But I think for me, being there, like, going on the road feels like the right thing to do. Like there was a set of sisters I spoke with who came from Hawaii. They spent $10,000. They stayed a week in Philly. They turned it into a trip, but like $10,000 to come specifically to see Unrivaled. That's a lot.
That's bonkers. That is crazy. Good for them. Good for them.
Good for them, you know?
Yeah. No, I think the going on tour part is so cool, especially to cities like Philly that they'll have a WNBA team soon. But like, it'd be so cool for them to go to these markets that don't have one, or go to markets that have really good college women's basketball programs like South Carolina or even Tennessee right now. Like these programs that have good women's basketball fan bases, and just show them like, hey, this is what it could be at the next level, you know. I think that's only going to help the sport. You know, yeah, it'll help Unrivaled, but it will help the sport. And that's what Unrivaled's mission at the end of the day is to help women's basketball. And Miami seems, and they're into Miami, but obviously Philadelphia is a lot closer to Connecticut than Miami. So if we could get a little bit closer, that'd be really fun.
Yeah, and that seems to be the thing. A lot of fans said that, right? Like, it's hard to get to Miami. Also, you know, one thing to point out about this attendance number, their arena in Miami, which is called Sephora Arena, holds 1,000 fans. 1,000 fans per night. Like, to go to Philadelphia for one night, that's 20 times the amount of fans that you can have there. And like, to your point, you know, all of these people being able to get to Philadelphia is different than traveling down to Miami. There are a lot of people who travel. Alex Bizzell, the president, told me that 60% of their fans in Miami are traveling there to get there. But a massive night in Philadelphia, Unrivaled officials told me they made $2 million in revenue. That includes $1 million in ticket sales and $400,000 in merch. The merch is big. I spoke with a lot of people, including that Yukon family, who's big Paige Bueckers fans. Their 9-year-old daughter, Julia, had a Dallas Wings Bueckers jersey, but they had said that it was just pretty difficult to get stuff online. Things were sold out. And so they had these huge merch tents. A lot of people were able to kind of go buy, I think, semi-exclusive stuff, or maybe it was the first drop. I'm not really sure. But I think they've tapped into something huge that allows people, you know, even if it is just kind of like tour stops for now. I think moving forward, especially some of the reporting I did, it'll be interesting to see how well this is received and how long the novelty of it lasts. Players love traveling, but they did not seem keen on tons of trips. Skylar Diggins kind of came right out and said it, like, the draw of Unrivaled was being based in Miami, being in one spot, kind of like limiting travel, one place to work out, all of these kinds of things. Alex Bizzell told me, though, that they're looking at 4 to 6 tour stops, maybe making multiple trips in a weekend to make it more efficient. But that's really where they're looking to go for this league. Do you like 4 to 6 or a lot or a little?
I think 6 seems like a lot, especially when you look at their season, right? It's not very long. It's end of January, playoffs start in March or end of February. Like, it's really not that long. And these women have the WNBA coming up right after that, right? Like, they are trying to stay
That's
in
fair.
shape for sure, but they also want to not be dead by the time they enter WNBA training camps. And like last year, we saw a lot of them got injured during Unrivaled. And obviously that has nothing to do with like what Unrivaled's doing. It's just a matter of sports and playing a lot of basketball and stuff. But also, 3-on-3 is a lot more tougher conditional wise than 5-on-5. So I think having 6 tour dates, yeah, that'd be really fun. And I think that would benefit all of those cities wherever they go. As if I was a player, I think I would prefer maybe like the three window. That way, you're traveling a little bit, but it's not a lot. And also that way, you're can still maintain a healthy whatever routine regimen. You're still based in Miami. It doesn't feel like you're there in and out like you are at a WNBA market. I think as a fan, you would want them to come to your city, right? Like I have friends in Oregon who are making the trip down to Miami this year to go to an Unrivaled game. And I know those tickets were not very cheap, whether it's the ticket themselves or the airfare. So I think that would help grow their fan base by bringing it to these bigger places.
Dang, that is commitment. I hope they're doing more in Miami than just making the quick trip.
I honestly don't know. Hopefully.
I will put you on the spot. When we were talking to Tiffany Hayes, I was asking her I was asking all these players, what types of places would you want to go to, right? Is it a place that doesn't have a WNBA team? Is it kind of a college town like you mentioned? There were a lot of people who said like the homecoming aspect of it for Kalia Copper and Natasha Cloud was really special, and they gave them cheesesteaks and kind of showed them around their town. So a lot of players were into that. But back to Tip mentioned, maybe we can go to Yukon. She's not really sure what she would show them other than maybe the dairy barn, and they could get it done in a day. But is there anything that if they were to go to stores, you think they should definitely see?
I think they could make it a Connecticut trip, not just a stores trip, because there's not much in stores. But if you do Connecticut, you could do pizza, right? Like they're known for pizza. It's not really lobster roll season.
We've heard
when they play, but they could do pizza. They could do downtown Hartford's okay. There's obviously a lot of great places in Connecticut. Stores should not be the selling point or like the main stop. That's a good point of like the homecoming aspect is really special, and it's really fun to see these players like get recognized by their home cities or home colleges. I also think the drawing point of Miami was that it was warm and they play during the winter, and you don't really want to be in stores Connecticut in the winter where there's 1.5 feet of snow or the temperatures are in single digits. So I think maybe going to stores they had like a runoff summer or fall tour date, that'd be kind of, obviously they can't do summer, that's the W, but a one-off fall date, that'd be a little bit more scenic.
I like it. I like that. We're going to stay in Connecticut because you were in Hartford over the weekend for Tennessee to come to town. Yukon won. It was their last ranked matchup of the season. They win 96-66. They're 23-0. Sarah Strong with a big game, 26 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and a steal. Dang, always a packed stat line for Sarah. AZ Fudd had 27, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 4 steals. She had 5 threes. For Tennessee, Janiah Barker, Z Spearman. Just initial takeaways from this game, because it was a big one, and watching it, like the final score did not tell what this game actually was.
Oh my gosh, yeah. It was, cliche is a tale of two halves, really. Uconn started hot like they have been, and then they took their foot off the gas, right? Tennessee just came, their front court was relentless. You talk about Spearman, you talk about Barker. They led for over 3 minutes. They kept Yukon scoreless without a field goal, 4-for-4. The score was tied at halftime. It was the first time all season Yukon had not had the lead at halftime. And then second half, Yukon came in and just punched and never stopped. So I think it was a really good last regular season test for the Huskies in terms of, okay, what do we do when our back's against the wall? What do we do when this opponent is figuring out our scheme, figuring out our weaknesses? Yukon's front court isn't as deep as Tennessee's. They have Sarah Williams, obviously. They have Geno Auriemma. They have Sarah Strong, who plays a little bit more of a 4, not the 5, of Sarah Williams in there. And so I think responding the way they did out of intermission was huge, and showing that, they they can turn around a bad second quarter and figure out ways to quickly fix their mistakes. I think it was really similar, kind of, to their Michigan game earlier this season when Michigan came back in the second half, in the third quarter, fourth quarter, and just nearly beat them. That was a little bit more of a response of like, oh shoot, they're coming behind. We gotta quickly make a move. Whereas this one, it felt like they calmed down. They took a breather, they fixed their mistakes, and they just kept going. They didn't really show any frustration, show any, yes, they got sloppy when Tennessee was going on their run, but I think after the intermission, they came out and they were just playing clean Yukon basketball. And to see AZ perform the way she did, the game before that, she didn't have a great performance. So that was really impressive to see that she can just put away last week's performance and turned into, game high 27 points. Sarah Strong, like you said, did Sarah Strong things. It was like, I think she scored 10 of her points or 9 of her points in the third quarter to really get Yukon back in the lead.
Very notable. I'm going all the way back. Very notable that you mentioned Tennessee led for 3 minutes. What that says to me is, and we know this about Yukon, is like they've just been in control and in command all season. And there's kind of 2 ways to take this. I mean, the first way is, and you kind of talked about this a little bit, like do you feel like Yukon has really been tested this season for a solid March Madness run? Because outside of the Tennessee game, like you're right, the Michigan game is the only one I can really think of that maybe put them in a tough spot.
Yeah, I think those 2. Their season opener against Louisville, they were the better team for 35 of those minutes. The last 5 minutes, they kind of took their foot off the gas. And Louisville didn't get super close, but they challenged the Huskies. I think Michigan and Tennessee were the most we've seen Yukon get frustrated and turn into not Yukon basketball, turn into a little bit sloppy, turn into just, okay, there's no communication. This is all discombobulated. I don't know if it's the flash of all of a sudden we're losing, all of a sudden we're being outplayed, or if it's just, hey, we have the lead so much, just reel it back a little bit, and they got to keep going, especially against a team like Tennessee or Michigan. Ucon's biggest weakness this year is definitely themselves, right? Like they have such a deep talented roster. You have Sarah Strong, you have AZ Fudd, who are 2 of the top 10 best players in the nation this year. You have great depth in their guards, in Ali Isabel and KK Arnold running point. But when you're winning so much, I think it's hard to realize, sometimes take a step back and realize, what are we doing wrong, right? Because no team is ever perfect, no matter what their record is. But realizing, okay, how in the game, yes, we have a hot run right now, but why is it that Tennessee's able to come in the second quarter and just go on a run, right? What are we missing? What are we slagging on? And I think that comes down to just mental and the team being their worst enemy sometimes, and slipping or just pulling back and relaxing a little bit. AZ Fudd said the reason the second quarter went the way it did against the Vols is because they just started relaxing a little bit. They just started to just play fun and not play as if like, okay, our backs are on the wall the whole entire game.
You mentioned they're kind of the villain to themselves sometimes. What will it take to knock off Yukon? I think at this point, like, unless you disagree, we're kind of looking towards March when it comes to knocking off Yukon. And I think you had said earlier in the week, like, maybe even not until the Final Four. But if it happens, what does that look like?
Yeah, I think they might not face another test again until Final Four, maybe even Elite Eight. Those Elite Eight games get pretty intense. But their biggest weakness is themselves. And after that, I would say it's their front court, right? They have some depth, but not a lot of experienced depth. Sarah Williams came from Wisconsin after 3 years there. Geno Auriemma has only played 1 full collegiate season. So what they're up against a lot bigger front court who has more experience, who's a little bit more all-around skilled. They get a little flustered. They get a little discombobulated. Sarah Strong ends up having to play the 5 a little bit, and she can play any position for sure. That's not doubted. But her normal position is the 4, and that puts a lot of pressure on her to do a little bit more, and that gets tricky. How does you balance that out? And so I think they might not see another test until they face a team like Texas or South Carolina that has really big size in the front court.
Is this the more dominant team compared to last year? I'll just leave it at that and let you run with it.
I think losing Paige was really hard, and you cannot replace Paige, not just because of her talent, but of her leadership, right? Like, she walked into that room and every player was looking at her to decide what the next move was. No matter that was on the court, off the court, like, she set the lead. I think this year's team, there isn't really that one leader like her that just commands the room, that brings the huddles in. Yes, Sarah Strong is becoming that. Az Fudd is like that, but she's not kind of a vocal leader like Paige was. And so I think missing that is different, but this team this year is so deeply talented, more deeply talented than last year's team. Even if you take away Paige, like this, yeah, you have Sarah, you have Az, you have KK Arnold, who's playing at a much more improved pace. All these players also are coming off winning the national championship, which just fuels them with undeniable confidence. And they're walking and talking like that. They're playing basketball with this kind of swagger now, but they have like, oh, I've won, right? But they're not cocky about it, because cockiness obviously leads to sloppiness, but they're confident in the way they're moving. You can see that they are playing, I hate saying Yukon basketball, but they're playing Yukon basketball, right? They're playing smart, they're playing sturdy, they're playing very just cohesiveness, and I think that's important. And with a team like this, yes, they introduced 5 new pieces with Sarah Williams, Blanca Quinones, a freshman, and 2 other freshmen, and a transfer in Kaylee Heckel. The majority of their roster has been together for years, and they've gone through a lot. They've gone through injuries. They've gone through just a lot, and winning the national championship. And I think that connectivity just in winning the that connectivity and the confidence pairs together in such a dominant way that I think this year's team would probably compete well against last year's team and maybe even beat them.
Paige was asked this at Unrivaled availability, and shocking to no one, she said her team last year, that national championship team, was the more dominant. But she did say, she said, it's funny because me and Caitlin Chen, have had a conversation like, do they even miss us? Is our presence even felt? Which is super funny to think about, that you take Paige Bueckers off the team and the team that's left is like dominating even more. You mentioned Sarah Strong in terms of speaking up in the locker room. Sarah Strong, even last year, like Dawn Staley said it at the Final Four, she might become, or she's destined to become, or will become, I guess, the best player to come out of Connecticut, which is absolutely wild given that pedigree. The thing about Sarah has always been, she's maybe on the quieter side, at least publicly. She's not going to kind of take the microphone. She doesn't take the lead on things. Have you seen that change in her sophomore year, especially with the absence of Paige as a leader?
Definitely. I think last year, and Sarah will be the first to admit it, and Geno talks about all the time too, that she kind of was just observant, right? Like, she didn't want to stick herself on something that she didn't want to interrupt. She was kind of more just watching. She was watching Paige. She was watching Caitlin Chen. She didn't want to put the tension on her. She didn't know her role. She knew her role on the court, but she didn't know her role amongst the team. She didn't know kind of what was expected of her. Not expected of her, that's a bad way to put it, but she didn't know where she could fit in, I think. And she was kind of observing that. Where do I fit in? Where do I make an impact? Who's who on this team? Who is the leader? Where can I say something? And this year, I think she's realized, no, they will listen when I talk. They respect me. I've earned this respect. And you're seeing her flourish in that. Yeah, she's not going to grab the microphone. She's not going to be the loudest on the court. But more and more, you're seeing her point out to someone during a game, hey, do this, or hey, don't do that, or hey, like, I want it over here. I don't want that. And you did not see that last year with her. Last year, she kind of played basketball. She kept her head down. She listened when Paige talked. And this year, she's coming into her own. And I wouldn't say leading huddles, but she's talking in huddles. And her players are encouraging her, like, we believe in you. We need you to talk. We will listen to whatever you have to say. It's not going to be the wrong thing. Have confidence in that. And I think you're seeing her just really understand that her teammates respect her. And she's starting to figure out that, look, like, yes, you're really good. You're incredible, the best player in the country, and embrace that, right? It's okay to embrace that.
Yeah, absolutely. We could talk Yukon for hours. There's so much to pull kind of like off this thread here. But is there anything else you want to talk about when it comes to them?
I think Yukon is playing at such a good pace right now that it's really resemblance to some of their older teams, especially during the Stewie years, where they were just winning, right? And people often said that Yukon is boring, Yukon is bad, right? Because they're blowing out these teams by 50, 60 points. And sure, you can think that, but I think this team really resembles that kind of Yukon where they're just all connected. They're all playing at the same pace, the mission, they're all bought into winning, whether it's winning that particular game, whether it's winning the national championship. And I think that's kind of fun to live back in that day of like, this is Yukon basketball, right? This is what Geno has built for the past 40, 42 years, 41 years. Yeah. And so not that this is saying the dynasty is going to live on forever, but I think it's kind of fun to be back in those days of dominance and of Yukon basketball.
One of my favorite things, just like a weird little trivia type thing, was being in Tampa last year. There were so many of us, including a lot of Yukon beat reporters, who that was the first Yukon championship we had covered, which is just so funny thinking about the fact that they've kind of like still been in this dynasty. They've been here for 20 years or something. And like it was a full 10 years ago, they were that dominant. And so to see it come back around with a player like Sarah Strong, like just incredible things happening in Connecticut for Geno, and Chris Daly is credited a lot with all of that. And actually, before Caroline went off to the Super Bowl, she spoke with Kia Nurse about their coaching style and why Yukon is so good. Kia is at Athletes Unlimited, which began this week. So let's listen to Caroline's chat with Kia.
Hoops 360 is so excited to welcome our very special next guest. That is WNBA and Athletes Unlimited guard, and of course, former Yukon champion as well. Kia Nurse joins the show. Kia, appreciate your time and really appreciate you for being here. Just want to kick it off with this off season. You know, you've spent this past year with the Chicago Sky, you've been on 5 teams over the last 5 years, and now you're a free agent. And there's a lot that's up in the air with the league, and of course, we'll get into all of that. But when you're looking for your next landing spot, what are some of the qualities in a coach or in an organization that you've been looking for?
Well, yeah, honestly, every time that I go into free agency, which seems like a lot lately, there's just all these questions that kind of flow. And obviously there is a lot of uncertainty surrounding this free agency, just in the sense of timing and when it's actually going to open up and happen. But for me, a lot of it is I'm older in my career now, right? I'm in my 8th season, but I'm still very young at heart, and young in regular age. So It's a lot about, finding fit. I think that's a massive thing in all professional sports, but professional basketball on both sides, men's and women's, is being in the right system for you, and your own individual needs, but also having great teammates around. Like every season is different. It goes however it goes, right? Wins and losses happen the way that they do, but can you actually enjoy the season that you're in? Obviously, from a win and loss column perspective, last year in Chicago, it didn't necessarily go very well, but my teammates were so much fun to be around. And this is my job. So when I come to work every single day, I want to enjoy going to work. And that's exactly what happened. So it's a lot about fit. What are the systems that these teams want to run? Do they want to shoot a lot of threes? Because that kind of sits more in my wheelhouse. And then places where I'm pretty adaptable. So I can kind of adapt to whichever situation that I've been in, and whichever team or city that I've gone to. But a big piece of it's just going to be having those conversations initially and kind of seeing how people want to play and the makeup and structures of teams, because we don't know any of that right now either.
Yeah, if you have questions, well, get in line. We all do. Just not a lot of answers as we're moving forward, which I'm sure can be kind of a scary aspect of that, where so many things are up in the air. And when you look at free agency, I feel like there's 2 different schools of thought. You can look at it as freedom, that you have the choice to go anywhere where, opportunities might arise. But like you mentioned, there's also that level of insecurity that you don't know where you're going to be living next year. You don't know what your contract looks like next year. Both of those things, I think, are incredibly valid. Kind of how are you looking at it?
Well, I think you have to start to understand that you have to get really comfortable with uncertainty,
Yeah.
especially in the world of professional sports, because there's just so many things that happen along the course of a season or an off season that you're not necessarily always sure about how things are going to turn out. And for me, I've just been focusing on the things that I can control. And the off season is the place that I get to control pretty much everything about what I do. And so I've spent the last 3 or 4 years at home doing Raptors broadcasts on TSN in Canada. And it's allowed me to have these off seasons where I can focus on the things I want to focus on the court. I can focus on the things I want to focus on off the court as well. And then in the strength and conditioning realm, and be able to come to places like Nashville and play in Athletes Unlimited. Because my first couple seasons, off seasons where I was at home, the one thing I felt like I was missing was that 5-on-5 kind of live action and being able to make those reads. And so being able to come to a place like Nashville and play in this Athletes Unlimited League is just such a joy for me. It was such a great time last year that I was like, yeah, sign me back up. I'll be back. But that's kind of how I deal with the uncertainties. What are the things that I can control? And right now, the only thing that is the off season, being ready to go whenever the season does get going for the WNBA and whatever opportunities arise.
Got to control the controllables. I love that. It's the truest coach speak that there ever was. But I do want to talk about your opportunity with TSN. I'm sure seeing it from a broadcasting lens gives you a different perspective of the game.
It does. And I love doing what I do on TV. I think it was nerve-wracking for the very first kind of times I came in, but I started doing it in 2018, just after my first Australian season overseas. I had come home because the season was done, and there's that little kind of 2-month gap between the start of the W season. And so I jumped in on March Madness. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, how do I do this? How do I make it make sense? And my producer at the time, Michael Hamarne, had just said to me, he was like, you're the only one in this room that's been to 4 Final Fours and won a national championship.
Yeah.
So speak from your own experience of being, in these situations. What are the emotions and the feelings that a lot of these young players are going through? What are the kind of things that exist in a Final Four realm that don't necessarily exist in the rest of the tournament? And so once I kind of thought of it from that perspective, it became really easy for me to kind of speak from an athlete's viewpoint. And then as I continued to go through and start with the Toronto Raptors as well and doing those broadcasts, it's been so much fun to watch the progression of a team. Obviously, I've been watching them now for 3 or 4 years, and they're in a bit of a rebuild phase, but they're doing really well in the East right now. And so it's fun to kind of watch how these different players progress, how these different systems progress, and be able to speak about it in a way that's very digestible to a person who might not necessarily know basketball to the extent that I do. But they've given me a tablet this year that I get to draw and do the plays and like pause and explain why this is working or these are the advantages that are creating. And that's what I love about the game. And that's what I love about basketball in itself is the IQ part. So
Yeah.
it's an absolute joy to do it. It's an absolute joy to teach basketball to a lot of newer basketball fans in Canada. Obviously, there's been such an uptick in excitement around having the Toronto Tempo come in this year and also the Toronto Raptors winning a championship in 2019. All of a sudden, there's just like this flurry of basketball lovers in the hockey country. And so it's been really fun to be a part of that.
Yeah, and we've seen so many either current or former W players kind of dip their toes into life outside of basketball. We know that Caitlin Clark is on the call for the Knicks-Lakers game. We've seen Angel Reese walking the Victoria's Secret fashion show, one of your teammates in Chicago. Candace Parker has done such a wonderful job at the desk breaking down basketball as well. Why do you feel like those off-the-court opportunities are so important for athletes?
Well, I think you have to remember the ball's going to stop bouncing at some point, right? And I think when you talk about women's sports in general, for a long time, I feel like when I grew up and somebody would ask me what I wanted to be, I would say, I want to be a basketball player. And they'd be like, cool, but what else? And it really annoyed me at the fact that my brother could say he wanted to be a hockey player and they'd be like, cool, enjoy that, get to the NHL. But for me, it was like, okay, and because there was always that thought of you have to have a plan afterwards because it's not a sustainable living. Well, now we're starting to change the narrative on that as well, right? We're starting to get into a place, and hopefully once the CBA is completed, an even better place where this is a sustainable living and you don't have to do an and. But at the same time, I think there's this unique perspective for female athletes that we like to go out and branch out into things that are not just the sport, right? And that we are passionate about doing or talking about or building. We have a lot of entrepreneurs as well. And so I just really enjoy the fact that we genuinely feel and understand and know that there is a place for basketball in our hearts and we love it. But I think it's really important, and especially for young athletes, to understand that basketball is so much a big part of your identity. It was a massive part of my identity, still is. But I think when I tore my ACL, I realized like there's got to be another piece of your identity somewhere in here that you can kind of rely on. And so I think it's really unique that we have the opportunities with our off season being as long as it is, to kind of jump into a lot of these different avenues and occupations and kind of go with it. And it's not about having to do it. It's almost because we want to do it. And so being able to do something that you enjoy, I think, is a massive piece and a very unique perspective of female athletes, because we really do lean into those avenues and find success in them pretty quickly.
Women are versatile. Women are
We are.
passionate. Women are marketable. More women in
Absolutely.
with it, where they can amplify their voices. More women where decisions are being made. More women, just period. But thank you. Clock it. You mentioned the Toronto Tempo. You are from Ontario. You've got deep, deep family ties in all things Canadian sports. Any interest in going home next year?
I am just really excited about the fact that no matter what happens, whether I'm playing for the Toronto Tempo or I'm playing against the Toronto Tempo, I will be able
Yeah.
to play a basketball game on home soil. And it
Yes.
is so so rare, I would say, especially even I've been on the national team for a number of years now, and we very rarely get to play many games on home soil. And so for me to be able to look in the stands and see all of my family members, my friends, even my grandparents, like that's the village that helped me get to where I am today. And there's nothing better than being able to look out in the crowd and see my parents there and see them enjoying an Olympic Games or WNBA or WNBA All-Star, and just being able to see how happy they are, because that's, to me, that's the biggest thank you. Like, you made all these sacrifices in order for myself to be here, in order for my brother to be on the stage that he's on. And so when we get to kind of live out our dreams, I feel like that's the best way to say thank you. And so I was blown away by the emotion that I genuinely felt when I was in LA and got to play in that one game in Edmonton. And just the kind of, I looked out into the stands and there was like different jerseys. There was like my Canadian jersey, my original New York jersey, Phoenix was in there. There were some LA shirts that were being sold. And so to me, in that one moment, it was like, that's my entire journey, really. Like, just sitting there, and I ugly cried all the way back to the locker room. And our security guard, Duran, was like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I don't cry, but I'm ugly crying because this was like, it felt like a full circle moment." And so I know when I get to play a basketball game in Toronto, it'll feel like another full circle moment, that everything was worth it to get to a point like this.
So special to have that opportunity
Yeah.
to just step back and just acknowledge how far you've come and appreciate all the people that helped you get there. And I feel like, too, the league expanding to Toronto is also kind of a step back moment to acknowledge how far the league has come. Going into the Canadian market, expanding into to
Mhm.
Portland as well. 3 more expansion teams coming next season. We're negotiating the CBA to, compensate players for the amount of money and attention and investment is being made into this league. And all of us on the outside, we see the growth. We can acknowledge the growth of the growth of women's sports, the growth of women's basketball, but you're living in it. You've been in it. What has been the biggest moment for you of like, whoa, things are different now?
You know what? I think for me, when I first came into the league, I was drafted to New York, and we were still out in White Plains and playing at Westchester Community. It wasn't a community center, but the Westchester Arena. And I think now, even though I'm not on the New York Liberty, when I walked in to play against them at Barclays Center, like, to me, that was just such a massive shift, right? When Josiah and Claire Wu took over that team, the things that they did to get them into Brooklyn, to give them better facilities, to, look at the crowd base and the fan base there. Like, I can look in the fans and still see like some of the original fans that were out in Westchester. And then I can also see like the timeless torches. Some of the timeless torches are still the same from when we were out in Westchester. But to just see the transition, because it was different, right? I came from Connecticut,
Mhm.
who had a really successful run when I was there for my 4 years. And we could sell out arenas. Came from Final Fours that had, tons of people there. And then we were in Westchester, and it was just so different. And your constant expectation is that when you go from level to level, that it levels up with you. And in that moment, it just didn't feel like that was the next kind of big progression. And now everywhere we go, any arena that you play in, your home games, like it's built and it's loud and people are excited. People know who you are now, right?
Yeah.
We're not in the airports anymore. When you were in the airports and the commercial flights, sometimes we would get so what team do you play for? What high school or university? And I'm like, no, we're grown
Oh,
women.
no.
Uh,
We're professionals.
but
Thank you.
I'm like, but thank you.
Yeah.
Now there's just so much more notoriety and more desire to want to watch games. I can go out to a restaurant and eat on the road, and they might have a WNBA game on. And that's just, to me, there's just so much growth in that and so much excitement that I think it's incredible for the league, incredible for the players, and been really fun to be a part of.
And it's been so fun to watch. But we're not done, right? We've got work
Nope.
to do.
Yeah.
What's that next step to continue to grow women's basketball?
Well, I think right now it's continuing to put value on the players, right? The players are the product, the time and the effort that we put into being really good at our sport, to being good ambassadors for our sport, to being good role models for tons of young women and young boys across the world. I think it's really about right now, this CBA is going to be massive. And I know that our union and our player executive council and all the players have been working really hard to go through all of these negotiations. And there's a whole business side of it that I will not talk about because I did not do a business major, so I don't understand everything. But obviously, I think as the business grows, I think it's really important that you value the people who are helping you grow the business and the product that is on the floor. And so that's the next step, in my opinion, in showing the importance of women's sports, but also the importance of the people that are growing the business and have been, not only myself and my teammates and the players that are a part of the league now, but the players who came before us. Because I know I wouldn't be able to step on a WNBA court if the players that came before to start the league and grow the league didn't get it to where it was today.
And I thought it's been a really big part of the CBA negotiations is rewarding and acknowledging why we're here, and it's because of the players. What has been your biggest priority when looking at the new CBA, looking at everything that's been negotiated? What's your biggest priority for this next CBA?
Well, I think it's a continued conversation about revenue share, right? That's been something that we as a league have been very adamant about. We as a players organization, have been very adamant about. And so I think it's really important that we continue to focus and fight for revenue share. It's not a secret. The numbers are out across the board on all these other different major league sports that exists already. And so that's kind of the next step in progression. I think the two CBAs the previous CBA, I was here for those kind of negotiations. And I think there was an incredible step forward in maternity rights and some of the health stuff that we were working with, player safety and player housing, being able to have a better player experience, but have security on the road with us now that we actually need it, the flights and whatnot. So I think there's been such great steps that next natural progression is that revenue share. That really makes a stance that like you are valued for the work that you put in. And that's what we're going after.
Yeah. It's been, of course, something that we've been keeping an eye on here on this show. And all we've said is, look, we're just cheering for everybody to feel like they win. We want the players to feel like they get what they deserve. We want the league to feel like it's in a position where it can succeed financially and on the court for years and years to come. You did mention in a couple answers ago, though, about going from Connecticut to the W. You are from the very strong and very storied sorority of Yukon women's basketball. Yukon this year is an absolute wagon. Sarah Strong, AZ Fudd, KK Arnold, they look like they are right back in position to go back to back. And I always say, getting to that level of excellence, that's hard enough. Sustained excellence is what really separates coaches and programs. That's what Geno's been able to do at Yukon. How? From your experience, what makes Geno and this Yukon team so special?
Well, I think part of it is Coach Auriemma, but also the other part of it is Coach Chris Daly. I think just they are the perfect tandem that's been together through all of this, and they balance each other out really well. in terms of, energy, strengths, weaknesses, all of it. Like, I just think they're a great tandem to have as coaches. But I think the big thing that separates UConn from other schools is the fact that for Coach Auriemma, he never lets you settle for being good. Like, he's always trying to push you to be great. And I think you could do something. I always tell the story. He was on me for not passing with my left hand for a long time. And then I finally passed with my left hand, and he mentioned something else I did wrong. And I was like, cool. So we're not
Awesome.
going to acknowledge that I did it. But it was just, there was always something else that he could push you to be better at. And I think he has a really good read on how does this player respond. I'm a player that you need to challenge. And he always said to me, I want you to respond to me with how you play. And that was my response. Like, he would challenge me, he would get on me about something, or if I was playing well, he might even still get on me about something. And I would respond with how I came out the next shift or how I played that next possession. And so he has a really good feel for what makes each player tick and how to get the best out of them. And I think it actually almost bothers him when he can't pull the best out of you. So he wants to get that. But I think what really speaks to Connecticut and Coach Daly and Coach Auriemma is the fact that in a league where it's extremely hard to stay and there are not a lot of places or spots to take, there are consistently Connecticut players that come into the league and have long careers. Some of them will be franchise players. Some of them will be like me, and they can be glue players or role players. And I think that's a massive, credit to them and them building pros, people that are prepared for the pros. And I think a lot of coaches, I hear from different coaches around the league at times, like, when I get a Connecticut player, I know what I'm getting from them. I know how they've been coached. I know the level of discipline, the level of intelligence that they're going to come into the league with. And so it's exciting for people to go after some of those players because they know the history of other Connecticut players. And so I think that's been a big piece of it as well. And someone asked me, I think yesterday, like, what was it like at Yukon? And I was like, that's the best decision I ever made. Like, for my career, for myself, that was the best decision that I had made.
And you played on some star-studded teams. You played with Brianna Stewart at Yukon, Nafisa Collier, Gabby Williams. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. Is there a particular story that kind of stands out to you, whether it was on the court or even just, behind the scenes in the locker room on the team planes that you think back on?
There are a lot of stories that happened.
We got time, Kia. We got time.
We had a lot of fun at Connecticut. I have a particularly really close relationship with Gabby Williams. We obviously came in as freshmen together and have been really close friends ever since. And I think there was one game where she got hit in the face and her tooth was not in the right direction. But she looked at me and she was down and she opened her hand and she looked at me and her tooth was not proper. And I was like, oh no, okay. And I just started laughing. She's like, is it that bad? And I was like, you look beautiful. But
you're fine. You're good.
I didn't want to scare her, but it was so bad. She ended up getting it fixed. But we constantly laughed at each other. I think there's some moments where you're like, it's going so bad. Like, we could be beating teams by 30 or 40, but practices are so hard. And you just have to really really on each other and, the experiences that your vets have had to kind of get through some of those tougher times, because ultimately practice was always harder than the games for the most part. So, there was a lot of times where Coach or CDA would yell at me and they'd be like, what hand does Peter use? And I'm like, don't know. He's like, left, Kia. You've been here for 3 years. He's always been left-handed. And I'm like, my bad. So, yeah, we had a lot of really entertaining times. I would say not all can be said on podcasts.
We'll talk off air about it. But find you a friend, find you a teammate that encourages you even when your tooth is hanging on by a thread.
Exactly.
That means something a little extra. The AU season is here. What are you most looking forward to? And kind of how would you endorse the league to somebody who may be new to it?
Well, I would say Athletes Unlimited is one of the most unique leagues that you can watch, but also the most fun. So think about everything positive that you can do on the basketball court, quote unquote, court. Wow, quote. all the positive things that you can do on the basketball court, quote unquote. Things on the stat sheet that are positive are all plus points, and anything that's negative, turnovers, fouls, they're all negative points. One player wins the league, but it is super competitive because everything is important. You can win quarter points, you can win game points, you can win MVP points. And so I love the fact that this is a player-driven league, that the players are captains, the teams change. So some of your favorite players will be on a bunch of different teams playing with a bunch of different lineups. It might be somebody that you've seen in the W and you're like, gosh, I wish they played on the same team. Well, that could happen here at Athletes Unlimited. So I would say tune in if you want to watch some really good basketball and extremely fun content. This is a great environment to be in with really, really talented players. And I am looking forward to another season of it. I am a captain for scrimmage week, but let's hope week 1 I don't have to be a captain.
Well, it's going to be a blast. Anybody that hasn't watched it, I highly recommend that you do. Kia will be tuning in to you and all your teammates at EU, wherever you end up in the W next season, and of course on all those Raptors broadcasts as well. So thanks so much for hanging out with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maggie, every week we do a player spotlight of the week, although I guess it could be anything, but who do you got for us this week?
Yes, on the Yukon note, Ali Isabel has just been incredible these past couple of weeks. Against Xavier last Wednesday on January 28th, she tied the school record for 10 made threes. It was the most amount of made threes in Gamble Pavilion and stores. She scored 34 points, which is the record for the best her career high, obviously, and then the best performance ever from a Yukon reserve, which is just stupid crazy to think about because they've had incredible reserves off the bench. And to think that she just did that, she was unstoppable. She just kept firing, and Gamble Pavilion got so loud. And the first couple were like, okay, cool. She's known for a great shooter, but then watching her keep going, you could feel her teammates' energy. They kept looking for her, kept passing her the ball, and seeing the Gamble Pavilion just get loud. It's fun because there's not many times during the Big East season where it gets that hyped for a game.
Geno Auriemma had some good things to say about her afterward, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. He was saying how, this is why they recruited her, right? He saw this when she was in high school. And she's a sophomore, and kind of like Sarah Strong, like we talked about. I think it takes a player at Yukon a minute or so to feel comfortable, to feel confident in where they stand amongst the team. Geno said that when Ali first got to stores last year, that she kept looking around and going, I'm playing with Paige Beckers. I'm playing with Izzy Fudd and Sarah. And just was a little bit more starstruck than she was focused on her own game. And now he's seen her just take that, embrace her confidence, embrace that she's also a Husky, right? Like, she's also here. She's also meant to be there. And I think you're seeing her really just embrace that confidence and play with it. And her teammates are encouraging her, and that, that performance last Wednesday was just incredible. And then against Tennessee, she scored, I think, 10 or 12 points as well. So hopefully she can continue to emerge as a really good bench weapon for them.
Well, we're on the same plane this week because, as we mentioned earlier, I'm just sticking with Marina Mabry as my player of the week. 47 points, 10 of 15 on threes for the Lunar Owls versus the Rose on Friday in Philadelphia. But it was really the first quarter, 27 points. She scored it in 5 minutes. The threes were incredible. I felt like the whole arena, kind of similar to what you were saying, was like, at first it was like, oh, okay. Then it was like, hold up, what is happening here? She absolutely just took over Philadelphia, the proud New Jerseyan native. Of course, when she was kind of asked about that, she was like, whoa. I'm happy Philadelphia had me. Like, let's not. So 2 incredible players this week. Who will we see coming up this week? A lot going on. Unrivaled is playing as usual throughout the weekend. When it comes to college, we have a big night on Thursday. Duke and Louisville are playing for the ACC title. Potentially, that game could determine the champion, the regular season champion there. We have a rematch with LSU and Texas. Looking at Sunday, again, UCLA and Michigan could go a long way in determining the Big Ten regular season champion. UCLA has yet to lose in Big Ten competition. And then Tennessee and South Carolina, just massive SEC battles every week. Maggie, I know you are tied up in Yukon more than anything, but is there any game that you're looking at this week you're going to make sure to have your TV on?
Yeah, you mentioned UCLA and Michigan. I think that's going to be really fun to see just how those two schools match up. They're going to be top of the Big Ten for sure. Unfortunately, USC has kind of dropped this year without Juju Watkins. So seeing UCLA take that dominant spot of the conference and go against Michigan, which is a very young but very good team. They gave Yukon a run for their money. I'm also excited to see Texas and LSU again. That was a fun first meeting. So to see the second meeting is always really fun to see what they've changed, to see how they come out. And then South Carolina, Tennessee. Tennessee looked good for a half against Yukon, and then Yukon just did Yukon's thing. So I'm excited to see what they do against South Carolina, to see if they will fix some things, to see if they can compete with South Carolina's bigs. SEC and Big Ten are just incredible women's games to watch.
Oh, the poor ACC left out of that. But anyways, as always, if you agree or disagree with any of our takes or want to add new perspective or have questions for us here at Hoops 360, leave a comment. Tell us what you're thinking. We'll discuss it on the show. Maggie, thank you so much for taking time. I know you're traveling. I appreciate you so much for coming on and chatting Yukon with me.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. As always, keep up to date on all things in the women's sports world right here on Hoops 360, and we will see you next week.